Éric Grenier is a man behind the CBC News poll tracker. Philippe Fournier, also a poll analyst. You're no stranger to each other. You both co-host a podcast called The Numbers. So let's talk numbers. Philippe, it's real now. Mark Carney is the new Liberal leader. What do the polls say about a Carney versus Poilievre election?
Well, we saw some diverging numbers in the past weeks. But the latest Léger polls showed that Mr. Carney still enjoys a 3-point bump when we insert his name into the questionnaire. However, we should stress that these hypothetical polls do not automatically translate to reality. So it will be very interesting to see this week the new polls with Mr. Carney as leader of the Liberal Party to see whether this new reality is settling in among voters.
Éric, we're going to bring up the CBC News poll tracker for the viewers here. So you see that really big change in support. Can we be specific about where the Liberal support has come from in the last few months? Are we talking men, women, NDP, Conservative, which places in the country?
I do think it is all of the above. As you can see there, we have seen a big drop in support for the New Democrats, but we've also seen a drop in support for the Conservatives. So Mark Carney has been able to, I think, pull a little bit of support from both left and right. But we should also remind viewers that those numbers you're looking at, those are polls that mention Justin Trudeau, or they're polls that did not mention who the leader was. I think a lot of Canadians were probably putting Mark Carney there in their minds. But he has really been able to draw from both the Conservatives and from the NDP. And we've seen a big jump in support for the Liberals in Atlantic Canada, where they now lead, in Quebec, where they also lead. They've closed the gap in Ontario, in BC, even a small uptick in Alberta and the Prairies. So it really has been pretty broad-based. And I think that's what makes it all the more concerning for the Conservatives, that they've lost that huge lead and that they've lost a lot of ground throughout the country.
And again, those were numbers that appeared before it was clear that Carney would be the winner here.
Yeah, and I think that we'll see over the next few days, once, as Philippe said, once some polls come out with Mark Carney, every poll that had been done over the last few weeks, kind of putting in his name in place of Justin Trudeau, saw a bump for the Liberals. So we are expecting that the next set of polls that we'll see will probably also have that bump.
Philippe, what's your sense of how strong that support is? In polling, I guess people sometimes refer to it as soft, the support.
Oh, there's no doubt. The same way that the Conservatives polling above 45%, like we have seen before Christmas, that was part of it was soft support. And so the Conservatives going from the mid to high 40s to the low 40s and even the high 30s in the latest polls we had from Léger, from the Angus Street Institute. This support was basically a bunch of voters who did not want Justin Trudeau to be Prime Minister past this year and were looking for an alternative. And now there is a new alternative. And so we will see in the very short term where these voters decide to park their vote.
Is there a story, Philippe or Éric, in terms of men and women? Are you seeing any distinctions there?
Well, Éric, you want to take this?
Well, we have seen that the Liberals were trailing among men by a huge margin, and they were much more competitive with the Conservatives among women. As we've seen that the Liberal numbers have gone up, they have made up grounds among both men and women. I think that we're still looking at that gender split where men are much more likely to vote for the Conservatives than women. But again, the increase in support has been pretty uniform. And I think it does suggest that the Liberals are regaining some of their traditional base, particularly among women and older voters as well. And as we know, those are voters who tend to go out to the polls in bigger numbers.
Éric, go ahead, Philippe.
No, I was just going to add, because also among women, we have seen in the past years the NDP polling higher, and those numbers have gone down significantly since Mr. Trudeau announced his resignation in early January. So that vote among women seems to be shifting towards the Liberals.
Mark Carney is now in the driver's seat, I suppose, when it comes to calling an election. Éric, what should he be considering from the polls as he makes this decision?
Well, I think there's a number of things. One is that he is still relatively unknown. We don't see huge recognition numbers when it comes to Mark Carney. He is getting better known, but there are still a lot more Canadians who don't really have that firm of an opinion of him. So the fact that we have seen good numbers for Carney over the last little while, when he has this low recognition, suggests to me that a lot of it is based on reputation, on his experience. And so there is a risk. The longer a campaign is, the more that Canadians could decide that their first impression of Mark Carney they don't like very much. They could end up liking it, but there is a risk there. And I think that if Mark Carney kicks off the next election saying that he needs a mandate to take on Donald Trump as soon as possible, that suggests going sooner rather than later and having a shorter campaign rather than a longer one.
So there's support, and then in our system, there are seats, right, which ultimately really matter. And I'm curious what that picture looks like. You both have your own seat projection models. What's your sense of how many seats do you have them each able to win and why? So, Philippe, why don't we look at yours first? We'll bring it up for the viewers here, and then take us through what we're seeing.
Well, the uptick, as Éric said, the uptick in Liberal support has been generalized throughout the country, but it's not as efficient everywhere. I think one of the most dramatic changes in the seat count is in Quebec, where the Bloc Québécois was projected to be the official opposition in Ottawa before Christmas, and now we don't see that. We see the Bloc has gone down to the high 20s, and so this surge of support in Quebec is boosting the Liberal numbers. So right now I have the Conservatives in minority territory at 150 seats on average. Of course, this is an average. The Liberals not far behind at 143, and you can see the Bloc Québécois and the New Democrats, 28 and 14 seats respectively, have gone down significantly in recent weeks.
Interesting. Éric, your graphic looks a little different, right? Let's bring that up. Why does it look different?
Well, it looks a little bit different because we put in a lot of the same numbers, and we play with them a little bit differently. I think overall what we're both seeing, though, you can see that the NDP in both of our graphics are at 14, which shows how much trouble they're in. But I think the difference is that it depends on whether we give the Conservatives a 9-point lead, which is what we have in the poll tracker, or a bit of a smaller lead, which is what Philippe has in his, based on whether we've seen a lot of new polls out in the last little while. But it just shows that both of us are showing that the Conservatives have fallen out of majority territory, a place that they were in for almost most of the last year and a half. We had them both winning 230 seats just a few months ago. So the fact that we both see the same thing happening, where it is a Conservative minority and a Liberal being close enough that this is actually just a few points away from being a toss-up in terms of who would win the most seats. Philippe and I, in our podcast, we made some bets at the end of the year, how many seats that we thought the Conservatives would win this year. We're both going to be really, really wrong because things have shifted so much in the last few weeks.
May we all live in interesting times. Éric and Philippe, the first of many conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne.